The Daily Show was created by Liz Winstead, Madela Smithberg, and premiered on Comedy Central on July 22nd, 1996. Having been marketed as a replacement for Politically Incorrect. We're talking about The Daily Show, by the way. A successful Comedy Central program that had been moved to ABC earlier that year. Madeline Smithberg. Madeline Smithberg was co-creator of The Daily Show, as well as the former executive producer, a graduate of Binghamton University. She was an executive producer of Steve Harvey's Big Time and a talent coordinator for Late Night with David Letterman. Aiming to parody conventional newscasts, it featured a comic monologue of the day's headlines from anchor Craig Kilborn.
Familiar with tonight's guest, but if you can't wait until January 11th to see him in this chair as the new host of The Daily Show, you can catch him at your local theater in The Faculty.
What's going on there? Shouldn't you people be in class?
It's like this, Mr. Furlong. Casey here, he thinks you're an alien.
Really?
The whole faculty, actually.
Is that true? Casey?
This is Jon Stewart.
Settle it down.
Let's not get carried away, people. I've got...
With that hug, I felt like Sally Fields to your Burt Reynolds. That was just,
It was
really
longer
nice.
backstage, the hug.
It really was. I forgot what a big, good-looking man you are.
A well-known co-anchor of ESPN's Sports Center. And I think that kind of hurt Craig Kilborn's how he hosted the show. How, obviously, if you look back, you can see that Jon Stewart was better at hosting than Craig Kilborn. And by what I've read, it seems like many sources characterize Craig Kilborn as this guy who came from Sports Center who he wasn't as funny as Jon Stewart. He was less funny, and he was more of a sports guy. He was more of, hey, we're reporting the news about baseball or hockey or tennis or football or something else. And he was more, let's get the news done and finish this up, instead of, let's have fun here and make jokes, which Jon Stewart and Trevor Noah did pretty good. As well as a mockumentary style on location reports, in-studio segments, and debates from regular correspondents Winstead, Brian Unger, Beth Littleford, and A. Whitney Brown. That's her actual name. Here's the difference between how Craig Kilborn hosted The Daily Show and how Jon Stewart hosted The Daily Show. Because you gotta look at what happened between the transition. I believe it happened in 1999 when the show was much less politically focused than it later became under Jon Stewart, having what Stephen Colbert described as a local news feel and involving more character-driven humor as opposed to news-driven humor. So basically, he took a character and made a joke out of it. Wittstein recalls that when the show was first launched, there was consistent debate regarding what the show's focus would be. While she wanted a more news-driven focus, the network was concerned that this would not appeal to viewers and pushed for quote-unquote a little more of a hybrid entertainment and politics, end of quote. The show was slammed by some reviewers as too mean-spirited, particularly towards the interview subjects of field pieces. A criticism acknowledged by someone of the show's cast describing his time as a correspondent under Kilborn. Colbert says, quote, "You wanted to take your soul off, put it on a wire hanger, and leave it in the closet before you got on the plane to do one of these pieces." End of quote. So clearly you can see that Stephen Colbert and probably many others on the show thought that the Daily Show under Craig Kilborn was soulless. It didn't really do anything big, unlike how Jon Stewart hosted the show. One reviewer from the New York Times criticized the show for being too cruel and for lacking a central editorial vision or ideology, describing it as bereft of an ideological or artistic center. Precious but empty. So basically, Craig Kilborn came on the show because the network forced her to choose him in 1996. And then in 1999, here's why Craig Kilborn left the show. Craig Kilborn's departure. There were reports of backstage friction between Kilborn and head writer Liz Weinstead. Weinstead had not been involved in the hiring of Kilborn and disagreed with him over what direction the show should take. Quote, "I spent 8 months developing and staffing a show and seeking a tone with producers and writers. Someone else put them in place. There were bound to be problems. I viewed the show as content-driven. He viewed it as host-driven," she said. In 1997, Esquire magazine interviewer Kilborn made a sexually explicit joke about Winstead. Comedy Central responded by suspending Kilborn without pay for 1 week, and Weinstead quit soon after. It was bad. So now, here we are at the gates of collapse. The show could very much collapse at this point. And I bet many people at the time thought that in 1997 that after a year of The Daily Show that it would end. But it's still going on till this day, and thank God for it. In 1998, Kilborn left The Daily Show to replace Tom Snyder on CBS's The Late Late Show. He claimed the 5 questions interview segment as a intellectual property or IP, disallowing any future Daily Show hosts from using it in their interviews. Correspondent Brian Unger and A. Brittany Bryan left the show shortly before him, but the majority of the show's crew and writing staff stayed on. Kilborn's last show as host aired on December 17th, 1998, ending a 387 episode tenure. Reruns were shown until Jon Stewart's debut. 4 weeks later, Kilborn made a short appearance on Jon Stewart's final edition of The Daily Show, saying, quote, "I knew you were going to run this thing into the ground," end of quote. So it seems that Craig Kilborn didn't like Jon Stewart. And obviously you can see that Jon Stewart took a more political place. And obviously the comedian Jon Stewart took over as host of the show, which was retitled to The Daily Show with Jon Stewart on January 11th, 1999. Stewart had previously hosted Short Attention Span Theater on Comedy Central, 2 shows on MTV, You Wrote It, You Watched It, and The Jon Stewart Show, as well as a synced late night talk show, and has been casted in films and television. In taking over hosting from Kilborn, Stewart initially restrained much of the same staff and on-air talent, allowing many pieces to transition without much trouble, while other features like God Stuff, with John Bloom presenting as a assortment of actual clips from various television sets in the Himalayas. To fill the time that Comedy Central had, they had a fake feud between Stephen Colbert and Conan O'Brien. And the absence that was shown due to Rosewater, which Jon Stewart took 12 weeks to direct, which was a comedy drama about a journalist jailed by Iran for 4 months. Correspondent John Oliver replaced Stewart at the anchor desk for 2 months. On February 10th, 2015, Stewart announced that he would be leaving the show later in the year. His last episode aired on August 6th, which kicked off the tenure of Trevor Noah, which would reign from 2015 to 2022. They considered multiple famous people like Amy Schumer, Louis C.K., Amy Poehler, and Chris Rock, but they didn't get the job. At the beginning of Trevor Noah's tenure, the ratings had declined by 37%. They gradually increased from there, only to fall to the lowest ratings in 15 years in 2020. Some of the musicians that have been on the show, as well as guests, performed their music as well. Obviously, eventually, Jon Stewart would return to the show, and Trevor Noah would leave to begin doing more on-the-road comedy instead of doing the hosting, like a hosting format, because late-night television he just didn't like. It wasn't for him. Not that he was a bad host, but, you know. Spin-offs include The Colbert Report, The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, The Opposition with Jordan Kepler, The Daily Show, Ears Edition, and many, many books.